So what does the NAR settlement mean to buyers and sellers, Alan?
Well, today on the No BS Bar with Alan and Betsy, we're going to answer some of the questions out there. Play together, work together.
So join us.
Let's have a great time.
All right, let's get into this. This is crazy.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you've been around watching the news, the National Association of Realtors has been all over it. And not just the Wall Street Journal and ABC and CNN. It is everywhere. Locally on Wavy TV 10, the Virginia Pilot, everybody is covering this NAR settlement.
Right, but we're here to tell you the truth because it's been a lot of misconceptions and
the headlines. Here's what I learned. It scares me when there's a topic that we really know the truth about and we read the headlines that are 180 degrees opposite of what it really is. It scares me to think about some of the other headlines, but that's a whole nother topic. So today we're going to tell you, over the past few years, there was a consumer class action lawsuit brought against the National Association of Realtors and most of the major franchises. One called Anywhere, which owns Caldwell Banker, Century 21, Better Homes and Garden, Atlantic Sotheby's, some of those, Keller Williams, Remax, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services.
Right.
So the lawsuit was brought. Of course, a consumer said, hey, I think I paid too much to my real estate agent. And they said, why is it that I have to pay my agent whatever, as the buyer side, whatever the seller side is offering, and the seller side, why are they setting the fees? And so it all became, consumer went to an attorney went to look into it. They found out there's a lot of people that could think this. They turned it into a class action. And before anybody gets paid, I'll tell you who's getting paid the most. I've seen numbers that the attorneys, the law firms, are getting close to $80+ million. But what happened is the settlement happened, the lawsuit happened, and actually the class action, the consumers won. They won $1.7 billion, which can be tripled because it's class action. So $5 billion plus, which really would have bankrupted everybody if they had to pay it. But they all said they were going to appeal. Then the settlements started happening. So the first one to settle was Anywhere, which is a bunch of the franchises. Then Remax settled. Anywhere settled in the 85 million range, Remax in the 55 million range. And then everybody else said, we're going to still appeal. Berkshire Hathaway said, we're going to appeal. Keller Williams said, we're appealing. And NAR said, we're appealing. But the next thing that happened was we started to see a little breakdown, and NAR ended up settling the lawsuit for $418 million. Now, they did this on behalf of the 1.5 million realtor members of their organization. So when you break it down, it wasn't the money, because the consumer, I think they're going to get $20, $25 a piece that were in the lawsuit. Not a lot of money involved. But what really came out of this is they changed the rules of how we got to do business. You know, in the past, commissions have always been negotiable. However, let's get real. We know there was a certain expectation and there was a range. It was in the 5 to 6% range most of the time. Sometimes as high as 7, sometimes could be lower with the flat fee company. But they were always negotiable, but the masses, I'm going to say 90+% were in that 5 to 6% range. So what's happened here though was they realized it doesn't really make sense how the real estate industry worked. Because what it was the seller was setting commissions, and they were agreeing to pay what was on the other side, and they were basically paying the other side to bid against them and to negotiate against them. And actually on the buy side, the way it was set was, if they actually did worse negotiating, if their agent did worse negotiating, the agent actually got paid more because the price went higher. So some of the rules that have come about are the MLS, our multiple listing service, after July 15th, and these all go into effect July 15th, pending final approval. Now, what that means is the court has to certify the settlement. In my opinion, it's not going to get any less than this. If they do not settle, it's going to be because the Department of Justice and the court wants more restrictions. So I think these restrictions are all going to happen, and the drop dead date is July 15th. So what it means is our multiple listing service will no longer publish what the seller is offering to the buyer. Now, that also means the seller, in likelihood, quite often, will not offer anything to the buyer side. They're separating out the commissions. They still can, it just can't be published and marketed in the multiple listing service or in any kind of electronic mass service except the company's own site. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as a buyer, you have the right to have your own representation as a buyer representative. However, before, you had a little, what I call dating time to work with the agent if you wanted to, possibly. Now, the new rule is you have to sign a buyer rep agreement with an agent before they show you the first house. That could be just for that day, it could be just for that house, or it could be for a year. But the fact is, you no longer can wait to make that decision. If an agent takes you to a house and did not sign a buyer rep agreement before taking you to that house, they cannot represent you on that property.
Correct.
So
they work for the seller.
They work for the seller. And the fact is, do you really want somebody taking you around that works for the opposite side? It's the way it used to be when I first started in the business. We had sub-agency was dominant, not buyer agency. So that's one of the other major changes that has taken place. The commission's totally negotiable. The seller can say, I'm going to pay my listing agent this. I'm still going to offer an incentive of this to the other side, or I'm not going to, and now it is totally negotiable with the contract. So just like the price and the other terms, closing cost, the buy side can ask the seller to pay their buyer rep. But if the seller doesn't, and it's not negotiated, the buyer is now responsible for paying their own agent in that scenario. In the big picture, it's going to allow more flexibility. We've actually been doing business very similar for years.
Yes, we've had a buyer rep agreement signed with every client that we've ever worked for since day one, except for 2.
Yeah, in the last 8 years, we did an audit, and we were basically operating this way already on our side because that's how we thought it should be. We did not want to have clients we didn't represent that we were working with. We wanted to represent the clients to our best ability, and that's how we've always been. So it's made some changes. Is it the end of the 6% commission per se? Well, it is in that it's not going to be bundled together as much out there. The seller, let's just say in that example, they're still paying their agent 3%. On the other side, there may be a buyer agreement that the buyer says they're going to pay their agent 3%. So there's the 6, it's just separated out. However, if they ask the seller to pay for it when they send the contract and the seller says, no, we'll only pay 2%, then at that point in time, the buyer's either going to be responsible for the other 1% to their agent, or their agent's going to have to give and say, I'll accept the 2%. There could be some downward pressure on commissions. We understand that. And there could be a lot more negotiating going on, but we're still here to represent our clients.
Absolutely.
And that is the number one thing that is not changing, is we are a company of professional agents. We are a team that is so experienced in doing business this way already that we're actually happy with the lawsuit settlement.
Yes, we've been talking about this for 2 years, actually.
Yep, we've been talking about it since it's been going on, what it could mean, what it could change. To tell you the truth, it might not be done changing yet because the Department of Justice just got approval to reopen investigations against NAR that could actually dramatically change it even more. We're already talking about that and how we would change and how we would do it. As far as Alan and Betsy are concerned, and the agency's position on this, we're actually happy with the lawsuit and the settlement, and we think it needed to come. We think it's in the consumer's best interest. We actually think it's in the industry's best interest also. So we're not out here fighting it. We're not out here. We think it is a good thing.
So for all the scared agents out there, we thought this was great, where all these other people thought it was a scary thing. We're going to be talking about this on another episode of the No BS Bar.
So we'll see you soon. Have a great one.